this point, I think I'm being fucked with.
The origin story is the origin story. You can't have a film not explain the setup or premise. But there are problems with the origin story, more specifically the way they tell it. They split the origin story in half. They show the first half in the very beginning and show the second half a bit later in the film. I actually understand why they did this. I mentioned before that child actors most oftentimes suck, so having a child perform a scene in which he loses his arm and leg to a creepy god entity is just out of the question. No child can pull that off. Not unless they were genetically engineered to be an actor from birth. You ever see Gattaca? Good movie. So the only solution is to have the adult act in a nightmare scene where he lives through the tragic events that led him to the point he's at in the film. Not a bad idea, just horribly executed. It's presented in a way where it almost looks like this happened to him when he was older, not when he was just a young child. By the way, he's supposed to be 11 years old here. And the story is supposed to take place 4 years later. The movie is asking us to believe that this is a 15-year-old. Just let that sink in. The first thing that struck me as odd is that they never show you what happens to Alphonse, almost as if they're afraid to show a child getting disintegrated. Which is funny, because the source material has absolutely zero problem with that. And it makes the scene better. You see the consequences of their transgressions against the natural flow of the world. Al is reduced to nothing. Ed loses his leg. The thing they made is a horrible monster and not their mother. And Ed sacrifices his arm to bring his brother back. But only as a suit of armor. I think one of the most powerful images early on in the manga and in the television series is this image of Al holding onto his dying brother. This single image is the embodiment of failure. A theme that's present throughout the series. But we don't get to see this. Instead, we're treated to one of the funniest things I've ever seen. The lack of impact the scene has is only furthered by the strange decision to make it less violent. Ed's leg stump isn't producing nearly enough blood, making it feel limp. His arm is worse. There's no blood, it's just a void. It doesn't feel like his limbs have been stolen by a strange entity that left him to die. Speaking of strange entities, the encounter with Truth is filmed so blandly. There's no tension or mystery or horror, despite the fact that it feels as though we're supposed to be scared or gripped with tension. Some of it feels intentionally hilarious. Also, I'm told that if I want to win fake internet points, I have to put this in the video, so enjoy! Lior is basically just a footnote in this movie. It kind of serves the same purpose as it does in the books, to introduce the characters, their abilities, and give you a feel for the world these characters live in. In the books, it also serves to introduce the religious themes and tones the series has. Fullmetal Alchemist isn't afraid to talk about faith, both positively and negatively. But those themes aren't present in this movie, which is very strange considering the main antagonist's plan is to consume God. This is such a small detail, and really the only person who would have noticed would have to be a super dork like myself. And here's the funny thing. It's not like it affects anything. It doesn't alter the plot, it doesn't have any impact on the characters, it's such a superficial detail that anyone else would gloss over it. And yet, it was one of the first things I noticed. And it bothered the crap out of me. It still does. The flag is the wrong color! The Amestrian flag is not blue! It's green! Like, do you see how small of a detail that is? It's minute compared to the rest of the film, but it bothered me to no end, and I don't know why. Why would you do this? What, did you think, well, the uniforms they wear are blue, so the nation's flag must be blue too? Do you see Japanese soldiers wearing white and red uniforms? How about America? All American soldiers dress like Captain America, right? Why don't you idiots have any lights on? The encounter with Shao Tucker takes up a good chunk of the movie, and I actually think that's what should have been the movie. There's enough going on here in this arc of the series where you could make a decent Fullmetal Alchemist movie if you just focused on this story. It's one of the most impactful events within the series run early on. Everyone weeps like a bitch when Nina gets turned into a chimera. And yet, surprise, they managed to do this story poorly. There's simply no time with everything else going on. Instead of this being a major focus of the film, it's stretched out in such a strange way, and it's done with all the subtlety and grace of an atom bomb. They take this part of the story and splice it together with the Tim Marco chapters, and it fucks with the pacing. We don't get to feel the unease, the dread, the strange calm before the storm. I want to briefly mention something I found peculiar. There's a shot in the movie where we get to see Ed's automail arm, and it's completely CGI. I don't want to criticize the CGI itself, but rather the decision to use it in the first place. Because in a previous shot, we see Ed's arm, and it looks like he's wearing a prosthetic. Ha! Get it? These two things share the same name. And the prosthetic looks better. I don't get it. I talked about the characters from a purely visual standpoint, but now I need to talk about the characters themselves, the lack thereof, and some that just don't need to be here. So a major chunk of this film is dedicated to the Shao Tucker segments from the books, which is fine. However, there is a crucial element missing. Scar. Scar is not in this movie. Why? He's the first major antagonist for the main characters, and he's not only crucial to the Shao Tucker story, but the backstories of a few characters later down the road. Scar not being in the movie ultimately makes Nina's part in this film pointless. As cruel as it is to say, Nina has to die, because so long as she lives, there's hope. In the books, they say specifically that they can't change her back. Yet. There's a chance they or somebody else can do it. It might take a long time, but there's hope. Here they say, can't do it, it's impossible, and then they just cart her off to live in some godforsaken laboratory.
At least I'm assuming they cart her away because they don't actually show you what happens to her. So...
The same thing happened in the original anime, but you know what? Ed fought against it right from the get-go, knowing full well the military would just poke and prod her for research purposes. And they still had the sense to have Scar kill Nina in the original series too. Here? And they horribly butcher the gods and devils scene from the books. It has no impact. It doesn't mean anything here.
Nothing is sacred.
Where are we? Right, Tim Marco. I actually have very little to say about this part other than I don't think it should be in the movie because it just messes with the flow of things. Jesus Christ, I just remembered we're not done with Shao Tucker. Okay, so they took these two story threads and tossed them into a blender. Winry looks like a fanfiction OC Do Not Steal come to life. She and Ed take a train to go find Dr. Marco, but they leave Al behind? With Shao Tucker? All by himself? For some reason? Like, they just met this guy and they're already super trusting of him? Like, really trusting? Like, Ed actually trusts this motherfucker when it comes to tampering with his brother's soul? What is he doing? Shao Tucker is a biologist. He specializes in bioalchemy, for Christ's sake. I know alchemy is basically magic, but they don't call it magic because it's technically not. But what Tucker is doing here actually looks and feels like magic. Like he's tapping into arcane magics. Benedict Cumberbatch, is that you? Get out of here, you rascal. But get this. There's a chapter in the books in which Alphonse starts to question whether or not he's actually real or if he's some sort of artificial being. In the books and both TV shows, it's a character called Barry the Chopper, another soul bound to a suit of armor, who puts this idea into Al's head. In the movie, it's Shao Tucker. Now here's the thing. What Shao Tucker does is awful and unforgivable. He's just a bad guy. But more importantly, he's very self-centered. He really only cares for himself. Everything he does is further his goals. So what in the hell does this do for him?
魂が肉体に引き戻されているのか。魂ではなく人工的に作られた記憶が剥がれ出しているのか。
Why say this to a child? Barry has an excuse. He's crazy. Shao Tucker isn't foaming at the mouth mad, and he isn't just cruel for the sake of being cruel. He has purpose behind the things he does. This decision makes no sense, especially considering that they travel to Laboratory 5 later in the movie, the same location that Barry the Chopper is guarding, and the most bonkers thing is that Al believes him! When Al is told that he may be an artificial being, there are a few things that make him believe that. Primarily the fact that his brother keeps trying to tell him something but can't bring himself to do it, which plays into Al's future paranoia. Also, the idea of being artificial comes from another supposed soul bound to a suit of armor, so it makes sense. And at first, Al believing Tucker does too, up until he turns Nina into a pooch. After this point, why would Al believe anything Tucker says? Okay. Back to Tim Marco. I don't have a lot to say here, but there is one thing that just annoys me as an aspiring filmmaker. So Winry thinks she spots Dr. Marco and rushes off to find him. They find this old lady and show her a picture of Dr. Marco, and she's all like, "Sorry, bro, can't help you." And I shit you not. She walks away, only to come back and say, "Oh, wait, shit, that's Dr. Morrow. He looks different because he's old and shit." Are you kidding me? What was the point of that? Just have her recognize him and move on. That was actually a waste of time. This movie stole life from me. I may not get the point of that scene, but Dr. Marco does. Right through his chest. Boom!
Wendy!
静かにしていればあなたはまだ生かしておいてあげる。
やめろ!
Oh, you talk, now you die. Oh, shit. Marco leaves Ed a note, much like he does in the books and TV series, except in the books and TV series, the note tells Ed to go to the National Central Library, First Branch. From there, he and Alphonse decipher clues that eventually lead to the shocking revelation that Philosopher's Stones are in fact made with Soylent Green, which is made of people! But Ed believes there's something more to it, so he decides to check out the 4 main military labs that Central City has. Discovers that there used to be a 5th laboratory, Laboratory 5 if you will, and investigates it. Now that sounds pretty exciting, and it is. We get to meet a lot of great characters along the way. Here's the problem. Tim Marco's note in the movie is different than the one in the show or books. It's just a transmutation circle. This isn't important. In fact, Ed never needs this piece of paper, making this pointless. And Tim Marco flat out tells him, "Go to Laboratory 5, dude. What are you, fucking stupid?"
いいから、後のことは私に任せて。
What do you mean you're gonna take care of it? I think Winry's about to bust out the acid and start breaking some bats. Anyway, you would think that Ed would go back and just ask where Lab 5 is, considering it's not exactly hidden information. But they have Ed go back home and do research as if he's studying Dr. Marco's clues. What are you doing? What are you researching? The transmutation circle? He told you what it is. It's the circle to make stones. And he told you where to go. You have your answer. Why are you wasting your time and my time? Also, what kind of pillock does heavy reading in the dark?
友達は助け合うもんだ。お願いします。ロス少尉とサンドイッチ君たちだ。
Oh, here we go. I like Maria Ross. She's funny, caring, trustworthy, all around really likable. She serves absolutely zero purpose in this movie. She does not need to be here. But I know what you're going to say. Marcus, you said one of the story threads in this movie is Hughes' assassination, and if I recall correctly, Maria Ross is tied directly to that story thread. And yes, she normally is. Maze Hughes being here is very confusing in of itself. The only reason Maze Hughes goes to East City is to bring Shao Tucker back to Central City, but Tucker is killed before that can happen. But Tucker hasn't committed his crime yet in this movie, so what the hell is Hughes doing here? The reason they give is nonsense, I think? Somebody explain this to me. There's this really confusing conversation that Roy and Hughes have about why Hughes is in East City. The point of the conversation is this: if you're going to make it to the top, you can't trust anyone, and you're going to have all eyes on you. I get that. That's fine. They borderline have the same conversation in the show, and I think in the books. But the reason why Hughes is there at all makes no sense.
俺がここに来た本当の理由？
率直に言うとそういうことだ。
イシュバールの内乱の後、どうもこの国はおかしい。その後も内乱や暴動が絶えない。ここにも多少妙な動きがある。
そして俺もおかしい。
Suspicious of what? What does Central Command think Eastern Headquarters is up to? Is this supposed to be in reference to what General Hakuo was doing at the end of the film? The thing that comes out of absolutely nowhere? What does the Ishbalan massacre have to do with anything?
その後も内乱や暴動が絶えない。
That part pisses me off because they mention a few times that there's riots and tension, but they never show it. The locations we do see seem pretty peaceful and quiet. And then all of a sudden, oh no, there are riots in Lior. Lior? Who gives a shit? We never go back there. We have no reason to go back there. Rose isn't there. The old man working at the diner isn't there. I think maybe this is him. I don't know. Who gives a shit? My brain feels like it's on fire.